In horror more than other genres, there's usually one or two films you really like that you never want to have to explain. Sometimes the weirdest things work. Some ideas that sound like they for sure should never have made it to a pitch meeting end up being cult classics. Horror has everything imaginable on offer. Pick your poison. Just don't expect anyone to understand why you chose it. With that in mind, I'm Sean Ferry for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror movie concepts that should never work but do. Number 10. Swallow. In Swallow, Haley Bennett plays a bored and traumatized housewife who begins eating small, inedible objects. She suffers from a condition called pica, in which the patient develops a compulsive need to consume non-food items. It's very much a real thing. Where the mind instantly goes when hearing this, and linking it with other horror tropes, is perhaps that she eats gross things like human teeth or maybe babies, or something like that, but it's not that kind of film. In the whole of the film, the biggest and most upsetting thing Hunter swallows is a small screwdriver, perhaps the length of a finger. Don't get me wrong, it's horrible to see someone choking on a screwdriver or puncturing their tongue on a thumbtack, a tongue tack now if you will, but it's still fundamentally not that scary. What makes the film work is the atmosphere it builds. It's a constant air of repression. Hunter is stuck in her house like a prison and the world outside is hostile. You fear the blowback from her abusive boyfriend and his family, the impact the world could have on Hunter, being as fragile as she is, and the truth of her past that casts it all in a miserable light. Sure, Woman Swallows Marbles isn't a great pitch for a horror movie, but hear us out and give it a go. Number 9. The Greasy Strangler. The Greasy Strangler came out in 2016, which is utterly baffling because realistically there was no place for a movie like this outside of the 80s weird fringe epoch. Do modern audiences really want to watch a movie about a greased up old man called Big Ronnie going around murdering and cannibalizing people? No, not really, you'd think. Apparently our assumptions were wrong though, and an audience for this does still exist in modern times. Maybe it's something about the miserable nature of modern existence that draws us to the abstract, and the film really is abstract. It seems that its own insanity and the utter dedication to it is what makes the film work. In the words of one reviewer, it made me chuckle, made me wince a little, and it made me enjoy telling people about it and watching them squint dubiously at me as if they suspected me of making it all up. Number 8. Dr. Sleep. Resurrecting a classic, beloved IP is risky, especially when it's one of the most well-known and loved horrors of all time, in this case, The Shining. It takes guts to try and riff on a film that people know so well and has so many intense, super hardcore defenders. It's no wonder then that these super hardcore fans were upset when they heard the concept for Dr. Sleep, a sequel to The Shining in which Danny Torrance pairs up with a young girl to defeat some shine-munching baddies and revisit the Overlook. In fairness, it sounds like it would most likely be a bit cringe, fall flat and essentially bastardize every good element of the original. But with an audience rating of 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, it's safe to say this franchise installment is certifiably fresh. One of the things that made it work was having horror genius Mike Flanagan at the helm. Best known for films like Oculus, Hush, and his stunning Netflix shows, Flanagan made sure to employ what he knows about suspense, emotion, and climactic set pieces to bring the film to life. Remaining faithful to both the book and the original film, Flanagan's thoughtful sequel captured audiences' hearts and reminded us that sometimes remakes, reboots, and revisits can actually be nice. Number 7. Spree.
Heard their phones are bad and Thomas Edison was a witch.
As the old saying goes, often movies like this have an air of snobbery from older generations. These people are convinced that everyone under 30 is an idiot incapable of independent thought, glued to their phone with one brain cell knocking about in their head. Hating technology is not a personality, and social media make me bad is not a plot. More often than not, concepts built around this idea fail miserably, not able to create a tone that is neither patronizing nor ignorant. Luckily for Spree though, they managed to skirt around the pitfalls and deliver a social media-centric film that doesn't make us cringe into the next century. With Joe Keery playing our unhinged main man, we're taken on a wild ride that sees him become a taxi driver serial killer. Jealous of other people's followings and wanting attention for himself, he constantly streams his activity to an audience of his disbelieving fans. It's got some good comedy beats, funny performances, and decently bloody kills. With someone less charismatic in the lead, maybe it wouldn't have worked so well, but Stranger Things' Golden Boy really came through this time. Number 6. Rubber. It's a tricky line to toe, the line between goofy and stupid. Too often horror comedies fall the wrong side of that line, rendering films unenjoyable because instead of laughing with the film, you're cringing at it. Somehow, Rubber managed to fall on the right side of this line despite literally everything being against it. The film follows, and I'm not lying, a sentient tire that comes to life randomly and decides to go on a killing spree. Oh, and the tire's name is Robert? As well as being about a killer tire, the film has an in-film audience watching a film about the tire. So we're sort of watching watching a film, but also sort of watching other people watching a film. Are we watching the same film as them? Is ours somehow separate? It's completely unpredictable and ridiculous, and even from my fantastic description of it, it sounds like a terrible and incredibly hard to watch concept for a film. There's really very little nuance to bring to this one, nothing I can point at and say, that's why it works. It simply exists because it can, and who the hell am I to criticize that? Number 5. The Lighthouse. You stick Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson on an island together, entirely in black and white, with a weirdly humorous script and a mermaid that has a giant vulva on her tail, and you call that a movie? Good for you. The Lighthouse is an entirely bizarre, slow burner horror that pushes the limits of what we expect from cerebral psychological titles. There's barely any body horror to be found here, few jump scares or dramatic frenetic scores. Instead, what we have is an uncomfortable, claustrophobic experience anchored by stellar performances from our leading men. You'd think that nobody would want to watch two fishermen slowly descend into madness amongst a dizzying atmosphere of homoeroticism, self-hatred and alcoholism, especially if, at random points throughout, the atmosphere is broken with fart and poop jokes. I couldn't wrap my head around how that concept could work until I gave the movie a chance. Someone smarter than me will be able to spell out to you what makes the mood, the script and performances tie together to make something great when that should never be the case. This just works. Don't ask me how, but it works. Number 4. Slaxx. I run into the pitch room 5 minutes late with a coffee in my hand that I've also clearly spilled down my shirt and tried to wipe off but instead spread it around. Foregoing the traditional PowerPoint method, instead I've brought a whiteboard which I violently plonked down on the long table in front of the panel of film execs. I'm breathing heavily, my eyes are wild, and inexplicably the room seems to have gotten 3 degrees warmer as the execs peer at my scrawled text. Only 2 words are written: murderous genes. Does this sound like a bad pitch meeting? Yes. Well, my fictional one probably was, but the real one was clearly good enough to get this bad boy greenlit and onto Shudder. Slaxx really is as simple as the genes in an ethical clothing store becoming possessed and slaughtering employees as one newbie tries to find out why. If you can find out why the genes are killing people, maybe you can stop the genes from killing people. It's logic applied to an illogical situation. It's a haywire concept with the potential to be an absolute flop of a movie, but somehow they managed to pull it off. With a range of quirky characters and an authoritarian corporate environment, the addition of killer genes seems completely fair. It's a stupid idea for sure, but the film has its heart in the right place and make sure to deliver lots of fun along the way. Number 3. Teeth. It's funny, simple as. The idea of your protagonist's main plight in life being her vicious vagina is funny. It's even funnier to think about being in the middle of sex and her gnashers just making an appearance and munching her partner's cock clean off. It's hilarious. You'd think it would make a YouTube skit, maybe a short film at best, because after you've seen the gag a few times, it just wears off, right? But what makes this film work? They took a concept that, on first contemplation, seems impossible to fashion into a movie because it's just comedic, and they built it up to be more than a cheap laugh. Whilst the concept itself is still funny on a surface level, the wider context of the film gives us roots that the story isn't a societal problem that allows for deeper meanings to permeate. Yes, we get to laugh at a doctor getting his hand stuck inside her vagina mouth, but we also get the satisfaction of her learning to use a part of her body that she considers her weakness or her secret shame as a weapon of her own protection and agency, aka she chops the peen off her abusive stepbrother. Number 2. Host. Given that it is now known for how well it pulled the gimmick off, you may initially be hesitant to accept that on a base level the concept of Host sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. Mixing the social media focused social commentary subgenre with the supernatural one seems like the kind of endeavor where neither gets fair representation, essentially taking paranormal activity and having it play out live over a Zoom chat. Host knew it was opening itself up to critique. Video calls are the ultimate symbol of lockdown life, and for the most part we didn't want to think about them any more than we had to. Making a whole film through the medium and having it be something that people enjoyed is no small feat. The genre-bending, lockdown-phobic odds were against it, but clearly something about Host worked incredibly well. The film was praised for the chemistry between the actors, its writing, and its achievements in production given the huge limitations. In the end, maybe that's what made it work. They went back to basics with practical effects for some of the scares, put huge care into their home lighting and stunts, and in the end reaped the great product they sowed. Number 1. Tusk. You kind of knew this was going to be here, didn't you? If you've seen any amount of what culture horror before this, and then you know that Tusk lives in all of our minds rent-free. If you've somehow made it this far, then let me enlighten you. The film follows protagonist Wallace as he is kidnapped and transformed into a human walrus. We're not talking a tasteful crossover here, like maybe an amphibious man with big tusks and an additional flipper or two. He is literally made into a big, bloated walrus blob constructed of cadaver skin. The mastermind behind it, it seems, is trying to atone for his past offense against a friendly walrus, which, as a motivation, doesn't doesn't carry much weight. The film has almost nothing going for it in terms of sellable concepts, and yet here we are. It was first conceived of on director Kevin Smith's podcast, with many people having just taken it as a joke, because obviously that would never work. Smith went on to prove it was all wrong though when he wrote and made the damn thing. Never say never, I guess?